All right, good morning. Here we are. We are going to go ahead and work through the lesson of auto creation of enemies. Now that the enemy movement is set up, you are going to automate the enemy ship creation. In the first section, you actually manually placed all 27 ships out, which is fine for a simple game, but if you want to be able to increase the difficulty or the number of ships, you're going to want the ships to be able to get automatically created. Maybe you want like 100 enemies on the screen. You're not going to want to go copy paste. So we're going to explore the auto creation, how to auto create your enemies. So the very first step, you're going to go ahead and delete all of your enemies, except for one. So I'm going to zoom out here. I can see, so the first step is to remove all of your enemy objects except for one and position the sole remaining enemy object off the screen. So you're not gonna believe this, but here we go. Because we're gonna let the computer generate all these. And then we want to move him off the screen because, of course, remember, everything, it's just kind of like the bullet technical. Sometimes I lose my red arrow. There it is. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is create four new global variables. Because you're having your enemies appear via auto creation, we're going to need more variables to track those new enemy ships, the coordinates. So we're going to go ahead and create, looks like 3 new global variables. So you do that on your event sheet. You could click anywhere in this outer gray space. Right click with a mouse, 2-finger click down on a Chromebook, add global variable, and the first one we're going to do is new enemies. Most of us had 27 on our screen. Some of us wanted to do a little bit more or less, whatever you'd like, just stay consistent. And we're going to go ahead and in the description, we're going to write keeps track of the number of enemies to create. Keeps track of the number of new enemies to create. So that's our first one. Then we're going to do an X position and a Y position. So add new global variable. This is going to be your X position. Still a number, and we're going to start our enemies at 75 on the X. Remember, your X-axis goes horizontally, starts in the top left corner at 0, 0, and I think our screen is 1,280 pixels wide. So we'll say keeps track of the horizontal position or coordinate of new enemies. And then we'll add one more, and this is going to be Y position. We're also going to start this one at 75. So that's 75 on the vertical axis, so 75 units down from the top left corner. And we're going to go ahead and say keeps track of the vertical position of new enemies. Okay, so there we go. We've created 3 new global variables. So what we're going to do is we need to understand how this is going to work. So before you could start building the automatic creation of enemies, we need to think about how it's going to work. So the first enemy is going to be up here at 75, 75, and we're going to continue to add, we're going to continue to shift all of our enemies over by 75 units. No, by 120. So let's see. We're looking at the X coordinates, so 75 plus 120 will put you at 195. We're going to add another 120, add another 120. So these are all going to be 120 pixels apart. The really cool thing is, and this is why I love computers and computer programming, we don't have to do that math. We're going to use the variable to actually say, hey, all I want to do is add 120 from the last guy. And so that's what we're going to do. We're going to tell our game to add 120 to the previous X position. We're going to tell, and then we're going to do that until our X position is greater than 1,150, meaning that we're going to continue this process all the way until X is greater than, let's say 1,000 or 1150. Sorry, I'm not good at continuously thinking about 4-digit numbers. 6 a.m. So 1150, once it gets higher than that number, we don't want to add anymore. Okay, so let's actually do it. So on start of layout, we're going to create a new sub-event called repeat. So we're going to go to the on start of layout right here. In order to create a sub-event, go ahead and right-click, or on your Chromebooks, it's like the 2-finger double-click right here, and you will get to add a sub-event. So our sub-event that we're going to add is going to be called repeat. We're adding it to our system. And we are going to repeat whatever we put in here 27 times because we want to create 27 enemies. Okay. So construct allows us to use an expression. An expression allows us to reference a number stored in a variable. So actually, rather than putting 27, because you might not have 27, what we're going to do is we're going to write new enemies and check that out. Whatever you called your global variable up here, we're actually going to plug it in right here. And so we're still using the number 27, but this is really cool because now if I change 27 up here to 30, it's going to change right here to 30. Or if I wanted this to become 100, then automatically it's going to change right here to be 100. So we're going to use our value or our variable of new enemies, which is actually storing the number 27. Okay. I lost my arrow, so here we go. Add actions to the repeat sub-event. Okay, so here we go. We created a sub-event, and now we want to add some actions. Our first action will be to create an object, and we're going to create an enemy on layer 0. So we're going to go to the system, and this will be create object. And we want to create our enemy at layer 0. Now this time, what we want to do is we want to lay our enemy down at the very first X position. So I would think 75, 75, but I'm actually going to use my variable names because that way, if I wanted to change that initial position, well, I could up here in the variable, and then it'll change down here as well. Good. Okay, one more thing we're going to do. We're going to add a new action using to this sub-event, and it's going to be system add 1 to the enemy variable. So system, and it's going to be add to the enemy variable. So enemies variable. Cool. Looks good. Next, we're going to add and relocate our enemy actions. So after adding the enemy, which we did, you'll need to add to the X position variable so that the enemy will be moved to the right of the screen. We're going to add another action to the repeat sub-event using the system action you created in the last step to add 120 to the X position. So we're going to add another action to the repeat sub-event. We're going to do system, and it's going to be add to. This time we're going to add to the X position, and we want each of our guys to get shifted over. Each new enemy will be placed 120 pixels to the right. Okay, check. And now this is really interesting. What we're going to do is we are going to reposition our code. And so we're going to drag the enemy add turret target action and the enemy stop action from the top of the start layout into your new repeat actions. So we're looking at the add turret target to the player and the stop animation. So these two that are up here on your on start of layout, we are going to come down here, we're going to drag them right here. So I took them out of my third event and I just drag them down into my sub event, which will be for repeat. Okay, now it says edit the action on the on start of layout that sets your enemy's variable to 27. We're going to go ahead and change that to 0. So right here, we're going to change this to 0, and that's going to be because we are actually creating code to create enemies down here now in our repeat loop. Now would be an excellent time to save. Okay. All right. Create multiple enemy rows. If you play your game now, you'll notice that it just creates a single row of enemies that extends far off the screen. Let's see. Come on, construct, please load for me. Try again. There we go. Ah! Whoa, where did they go? Oh, look at that. Okay, that's really interesting. We'll see. Oh, look, they're still... Okay, that's what they were talking about. They're extending off the screen. Super interesting. Well, let's keep going. Far off... That extends far off the right of the screen. Yep. So you need to build in the functionality so multiple enemy rows are created. You can do this by adding a sub-event under the repeat sub-event. You ready for this? We are creating a sub-event to this sub-event. So come over here underneath the 4 and you're going to add sub-event. And what we are going to do is this will be the system object and compare variable. So system, and we're going to do compare variable. And we're going to say that if our x position is greater than or equal to 1,500, oh, okay, interesting. So if this is true, then what we're going to do is we will set the x position, set variable, so set value. That was set value. I might have gone too fast for that. Set value. Our x position to 75. We will go ahead and add another action that will be to add 65 to the y position. Oh, I see. So this is going to shift them down. So we'll do add 2. Your y position of 65. This is really interesting. So essentially what we're doing is we've got this really long top row, and then we're saying that once it hits a certain mark, then we're actually going to start creating that second row. So it's almost like we're programming, like, I don't want to say a snake, but it's kind of like that idea. We're programming one row, but we're splitting that row into 3. Okay, so add add 65 to Y position, and then on the onStart of layout, add a action to set the X position to 75. So we're going to come up here to the onStart of layout, and we're going to set value, and this will be our X position to 75, and then we're going to set the Y position Y position to 75. All right, create the enemy type global variable. Whew, well, I'm pretty good at that. So the last step to get the enemy creation process working is to show different enemy ships with different turret rates of fire and different bullet speed. So we're going to create a new global variable called enemy type. Remember, to create a global variable anywhere in the gray, we'll do add new global variable, and we're going to call this enemy type. And we're going to start it as 0. And if I wanted to create a zip a description, keeps, what does that say? Keeps track of different enemy types. Okay, so keeps track of different enemy types. Okay, good. So I created my global variable. We're going to add a new action to the repeat new enemies times event for the enemy object to set frame. So I'm going to come right here. This is my repeat new enemies event, and I'm going to add a new action. So I'm right here. I'm going to add a new action, and my action will be for the enemy object to set frame. So this will be set frame. And set the frame number to enemy type. So enemy type. Using the expression dropdown. Check. Did that. Good. Now add an action to the once. Oh, okay, so this is saying that once our X values are greater than 1150, we're going to go ahead and add 1 to the enemy type. So that's our system. We're going to add 2. So we could do add 2. And we're going to say that once our guys are all the way off the screen on the right, we are going to change the enemy type value to 1. Add system compare sub event. If you play the game more than once, you'll notice that the enemy ships eventually all turn into whatever your last animation frame is set to. You can add another sub event to check if the enemy type gets greater than 2 to reset it back to 0. So we're going to add a sub event. We're going to add a sub event to our sub event. So yes, you are adding one more sub event right here. So we're going to go to add sub event for the system object to compare variable. We're going to check to say, is our enemy type greater than 2? If our enemy type is greater than 2, we are going to go ahead and add an action, and we're going to say set value, And we're going to say, well, once our enemy type gets greater than 2, we want to circle it back and it will become 0. So enemy type will now be 0. Done. Okay, so now we're going to add the type enemy instance variable. So sometimes it's useful to track specific information using an individual enemy object in the game. In this case, it's useful for each enemy to store information about what enemy type they are. This way you could change the bullet speed, turret rate of fire for each different type of enemy. To do this, you will need to add an instance variable to the enemy object. So we're going to click on the enemy object, and then we're going to click on the instant variables link in the property bar in the instant variables section. Okay, let's see. So I'm going to click on the object, enemy object. So this is my enemy spaceship. And now in my properties bar, I see this instant variables. So remember, enemy spaceship, instant variables. And we're going to add a instance variable. We're going to call it type. Make it a number with an initial value of 0. And then we're going to click OK. Set the type instance variable. Okay, so to set the new type instance variable for each enemy, we're going to add a new action to the repeat event. So I'm going to click X here, and I'm looking for my repeat event. That's this one right here. And I will add a new action to the repeat event. So really just this one right here. So this is my repeat event, and I'm going to add a new action right here. Select the enemy object, and then select set value. Under the instance variables. And we're going to set the type instance variable to a value of enemy type. This sets the first row of enemies to type 0, the second row to type 1, and the third row to type 2. Add enemy type sub-event to the turret event. To make it more interesting, every time your enemy turret fires, you'll want the turret rate of fire based on the enemy type that fires that bullet. You can also vary the bullet speed based on the enemy type. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a new sub-event to the enemy on turret shoot event. So this is it. So line 2, remember we're going to add a sub-event. Select the enemy object with a condition of compare instance variable. Compare instance variable. And we're going to check if the type variable is equal to 0. Cool. Now it says add an action. Okay, so we're going to do, okay, so that's our event. And now we'll give this an action. And so we're going to say that if our type is 0, meaning this is like our top row of guys, we're going to add an action. And we're going to say, well, we want our enemy to set fire, set rate of fire to 8. So remember, this is all, we kind of brute forced this in section 1, but now we wanted to kind of regenerate. We wanted our enemies to auto-create, and so we're using all these different variables to kind of go in and perform the same process that we did, but now everything is all connected. So if you happen to change like the amount of enemies that you want or how far apart they are, you'll be able to keep consistent like your rows, and so this is just really allowing the computer to do a whole lot more. Okay, so I did that. I have a feeling we're going to need to do type 1 and type 2. Add an action to your new sub-event that's going to set the bullet speed. Okay, so right here we've got this enemy bullet set speed. Make sure it's the one in the bullet menu. And 250. Oh my goodness. Now we're going to edit the enemy bullet image and create 2 new animation frames with different color bullets. Well, we want each row of our spaceships to have different colored bullets, right? So down here, you'll go to duplicate and duplicate, and let's see, I'm going to use my paint bucket. Okay, so I did that. Check, check. After the action to create bullet on new turret, we're going to add an action to stop the enemy bullet animation. So after the action to create the bullet on the on turret shoot, add an action to stop animation. So after the action to create the bullet, I guess it's this one right here, we'll add stop the enemy bullet animation. Oh, okay, so we're going to do stop animation right here, which is in the sub-event. Okay, I think I get out of this by this. Okay, so add action, and this was stop the enemy bullet animation. And so we want to put it right there. And then we're going to add an action to the set animation frame of the enemy bullet to enemy type. Add an action to the set animation frame. I'm going to just take a look at what they did right here. Okay, so we did that, we did that, we did that. Did that, stop animation, just did that, right? Set frame. Okay, so still in this one, we're going to do enemy bullet, set animation frame to enemy type. Okay, I got that. So right here, we're going to do the bullet, and it was set frame. And we wanted to do enemy type. Look at that, 13 out of 16. We're almost there. All right, we're gonna do this again. Wow. I'm gonna take a breather here, so I'll come back for a part 2 on this one, and we'll finish this game up, or this, what was this? Enemy auto creation up. So stay tuned for part 2, coming to a theater near you.